Hello and welcome to the eFresh.com Dairy News. Today is the 24th of September. My name is Kim and these are this week's headlines. Strike fails to stop dairy operation. Fonterra cap share price to internal trades. Dairy group airs carbon tax fears. Health ills Abound farm. Dairy still a draw for students. The first full day of a planned 8-day strike at Open Country Dairy in New Zealand was business as usual, according to Chief Executive Mark Fankhauser. But for the dozens of workers who picketed outside the dairy factory near yesterday, it was a long, intense day, especially when non-union labor went to work during shift changes. Mr. Fankhauser said the factory processed 1.75 million liters of milk yesterday, more than normal for the time of year. He said Open Country sent 2 tankers to Wanganui last week before the strike as a test run. Mr. Fankhauser would not say where half a dozen extra workers had come from. A Dairy Workers Union spokesman said there had been no change in stance from the union and the company, and the strike action would continue as planned until Thursday. Fonterra's new bid for a capital restructure will loosen the ties between milk flow and a farmer's shares in the cooperative, and allow farmers to trade shares between themselves. But the giant cooperative has denied that it is grooming its farmers for shares to eventually be traded by outside investors. Fonterra Chief Executive Andrew Ferrier said the company had a lot of projects in the queue for cash, but the company would fit its growth around the available capital. After that, the company might be able to harvest capital from retained earnings by further boosting the proportion of shares farmers can own to 140%, or even allowing retiring farmers to retain shares rather than sell them. There is also potential for selected New Zealand pension funds to hold non-voting shares in the company. The South Coast and Highlands Dairy Industry Group says it will be very hard for Australian dairy farmers to compete internationally if a carbon tax is imposed on their cattle. About 40 local dairy farmers attended a forum to discuss their concerns about the government's trading scheme. The group's chairman, Joe Chittick, says the government needs to consider the impact the scheme will have on the industry and consumers. According to him, New Zealand is the biggest competitor in dairy, and they seem to be going to accommodate their dairy industry. That will make it difficult to compete, and eventually there would be a very small or no dairy industry in Australia. Mr. Chittick said that he would be very supportive to make an economically viable scheme that is good for all farming practices and the consumer. There are 41,000 dairy cows in Brown County, which includes Morrison, and they produce more than 260 million gallons of manure each year, much of which is spread on nearby grain fields. Other farmers receive fees to cover their land with slaughterhouse waste and treated sewage. In measured amounts, that waste acts as fertilizer. But if the amounts are excessive, bacteria and chemicals flow into the ground and contaminate residents' tap water. In Morrison, more than 100 wells were polluted by agricultural runoff within a few months, according to local officials. After Brown County's wells became polluted, Wisconsin created new rules prohibiting farmers in many areas from spraying manure during winter, and creating additional requirements for large dairies. Agriculture students are still interested in the dairy sector as a career, despite the widespread problems currently hitting the industry. Around 60% of students quizzed by the Royal Association of British Dairy Farmers said they were considering dairy as long as it was profitable. Just over 60% of agriculture students said they were interested in a career in dairying, with 80% of those actually committed to milking cows. Working outdoors with livestock was the main reason students were interested in the sector. The turnoffs were the long hours and low returns. Thank you for watching the eFresh.com Dairy News. See you next time.